Hello there, welcome to Africa Live, CCTV's new program that brings you African and global news from all perspectives. I'm Ramanyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Here's what we have lined up for you over the next 30 minutes.
A big success for Africa, a big success for entrepreneurs, a big success for the banking sector, a big success, period.
One of Africa's largest homegrown banking groups, Ecobank Transnational, celebrates 25 years of operation. And Nigeria's Obi Mikel was on target as the African champions lose to Uruguay in the Confederations Cup. At least 4 people have been killed in fighting between factions of Somalia's Al-Shabaab group on Thursday. Reports indicate that 2 of the dead fighters are foreign Al-Shabaab combatants. Now, then fighting broke out following recent tensions within the militant group's ranks. The top leaders have for 2 months been pursuing American national Omar Hamami, whom they accuse of having become a renegade and an affront to the cause of the jihad. Hamami has been on the run since April this year and tweeted to have escaped assassination attempts by the insurgents in May. Now, as tensions escalated, many other top Al-Shabaab clerics allied to Omar Hamami condemned actions aimed at pursuing him.
We have had reports that the top Al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, has ordered Al-Shabaab leaders to kill dissidents within its ranks to remain true to the cause, and tensions have therefore been building up within Al-Shabaab over the last couple of months.
Still in Somalia, memorial service was held at the Mogadishu International Airport on Thursday for the United Nations staff and contractors who lost their lives during the attack on a United Nations compound in the Somali capital. The militant group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for that deadly event. CCTV's Maria Galang has more.
A day of mourning following an attack on Wednesday where a pickup truck rigged with explosives was detonated outside the gate of the UN compound, with gunfire and further explosions inside the building, killing 15 people. The Somali president and the UN Secretary General's representative to Somalia held a special memorial service in Mogadishu on Thursday for those killed in the attack.
Yesterday was a very sad day, tragic day. We lost a number of colleagues, international as well as local Somali national staff. It was a blow to the United Nations, but it is a blow from which we shall recover. We are determined to keep to the mission out of respect for those who die yesterday. We can do nothing less.
On behalf of Somali people, and on behalf of Somali government, and on behalf of my own name, we share the pain and the remembrance of those who have fallen yesterday.
The bodies of 3 United Nations workers, 1 Kenyan and 2 South Africans killed in the attack, arrived in Kenya on Thursday, where family members and colleagues wept for their loved ones. President Hassan Sheikh has assured the international community and the UN staff that the Somali community will continue to work with them and support the UN regardless of the attack. Maria Galang, CCTV.
With us now live from Mogadishu, CCTV's Mohammed Hidmoge. He's got the latest information from the Horn of Africa country. Mohammed, good to see you. There have been some reports of heavy fighting that has taken place between rival factions of Al-Shabaab near the key coastal town of Brava. Can you confirm this and give us any further details?
Indeed, Rama, our reliable sources indicate that indeed there has been fighting in the town of Brava, that is Lower Shabelle, a region where rival factions within the Al-Shabaab, some loyal to the Al-Shabaab heads currently and others, a faction that is loyal to the American-born Omar Hamami, who is also known as Al-Mansur al-Ameriki, clashed yesterday where 4 allegedly were killed. 2 of them, the reports indicate, are foreign fighters, foreign jihadists, as Al-Shabaab would like to put it. Now, this started as a question of differences in strategy between Hamami and the other Al-Shabaab leaders, and later on it escalated to become issues of loyalty within the Al-Shabaab ranks. And following what Hamami has been writing in his Twitter handle, he has been on the run the last 2 months. And the last time he tweeted, he actually said this might be his last word on Twitter. Now, we don't have much report on that, but it is true that there is infighting between the ranks of Al-Shabaab, and we don't know right now whether Hamami has been killed or whether any other top leader of the Al-Shabaab has been killed in the infighting on Thursday. Rama.
Indeed, following the attack on the UN base in Somalia, there's been quite a bit of heightened security around the country, especially around other non-governmental organizations, hasn't there?
Sure, there's some sort of heightened security over here, but then again, security situation over here is always quite funny, both unreliable and inconsistent, because every time there is an attack, the security apparatus up their game. You'll find a lockdown, you'll find barricades, and you'll find every vehicle and every person on the street getting searched. But that again does not last for the coming weeks and days. And of course, the Al-Shabaab have learned this lesson. Some might argue that the Al-Shabaab will just have to wait until the government again falls back into some laxity and capitalize on that, like what happened at the UNDP headquarters on Wednesday. Then again, right now this morning we saw there are barricades on a boulevard that passes along the Turkish embassy, and that could mean that intelligence might be worried of the fact that the next target could be the Turkish or any other place. Therefore, there are barricades right now, there are heightened security levels over here, but again, as we have seen over the past couple of months and years, that is both inconsistent and unreliable, and with some time that too will ease. Security forces, as they usually do, ease their security preparedness.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. That's CCTV's Mohammed Hirmoge live in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. Thank you very much for your time. Here in neighbouring Kenya, police in the northern end of the country have seized bomb-making chemicals which they believe are being taken into Somalia. Now, the chemicals were in a lorry that was intercepted at a security checkpoint. It's been close to 2 years since Kenya's incursion into Somalia in pursuit of Al-Shabaab militants blamed for spate of attacks, including a wave of kidnappings. As CCTV's Jen Kerr reports, for Kenya, the war on this ragtag militia is far from being won in and outside her borders.
This is part of the more than 27 tons of assorted chemicals that Kenya says can be used in making bombs and explosives. They were found in a lorry that was en route to Somalia from the coastal town of Mombasa. Police believe the consignment that includes sodium sulfate, sodium bicarbonate that is used to make baking soda, and sodium formate were meant for the Al-Shabaab militants.
If it managed to go to Somalia, it would have meant many bombs and explosives that could have maybe come back to detonate some areas in our country.
Indeed, Kenya's incursion into Somalia in pursuit of the Al-Shabaab militants has produced mixed results, particularly in Kenya, where the group continues to carry out attacks. The grenade attacks have been mostly targeted at churches. And just last month, police recovered an assortment of weapons buried in a cemetery in the same northeastern town of Wajir. Following the attacks and with the latest discoveries, experts are now questioning Kenya's security surveillance as compared with her neighbors like Ethiopia and Uganda, who have both sent troops into Somalia but somehow successfully managed to contain infiltration and attacks by militant groups on their soil. Years after withdrawing from Somalia after an inconclusive effort to support the transitional federal government by defeating the Islamic Courts Union, Ethiopia, which faced a direct threat to its borders, has remained peaceful. The same applies to Uganda, whose troops are currently in Somalia. The country has fended off any terrorist attacks since the 2010 attacks in Kampala. Jane Keo, CCTV.
Let's delve deeper into the issue now. With me in studio is Douglas Okwach. He's a seasoned journalist covering African affairs and is also the editor for CCTV's Talk Africa show. Douglas, thanks so much for your time. Kenya spent quite a few billion shillings sending troops into Somalia since October 2011. But Uganda has also done more or less the same thing. Ethiopia has done more or less the same thing. But those two countries seem to have done a far better job of preventing attacks on their soil. What's the problem in Kenya? Is it a question of proximity?
Well, thanks, Rama. I think the problem with Kenya really has to do so much with Kenya sharing a border with Somalia. And manning that border has been quite a challenge for Kenya. That border is quite porous. And when borders are porous, it means, like in the case of Kenya-Somalia, weapons easily cross, and illegal people also cross the borders into Kenya. So the border issue is why Kenya is very, very vulnerable. So we know that insurgents can easily cross into the country, carry out attacks, and retreat into Somalia. We also know that part of the insecurity problems in Kenya are as a result of weapons easily finding their way into Kenya from Somalia.
So would it be fair then to argue that the porous border that Kenya shares with Somalia really also has acted as a sort of lifeline for Al-Shabaab? Because yes, we've taken Kismayo, KDF troops and AMISOM troops have occupied that strategic port, but Al-Shabaab is still fairly active across southern Somalia and the rest of East Africa.
Absolutely. I think that is what makes Uganda, for example, different. I think Kenya has put in quite a huge amount of resources in trying to deal with the issue. But the issue of the common border and the inability of Kenya to completely monitor that border is what is perpetuating this Al-Shabaab problem in the country. And you see the attacks happened in Nairobi, the capital. The attacks have happened in Mombasa, the second largest city. And many of the suspects have easily found their way back into Somalia. And this is also very historical. You remember the first terrorist attacks in 1998? Reports suggest that for as long as about 3 years before those attacks had happened, there were Al-Qaeda elements that had already found their way into the country and mingled with the population. And they very easily find it, they find it very easy to gather intelligence and plot their attacks
and
while in the country.
They came through the porous border with Somalia.
Came through the porous border with Somalia.
Last question for you. Kismayo has been taken. Obviously, that takes quite a bit of resources out of Al-Shabaab. The group is now divided, and we're hearing reports of infighting. What would it take to completely crush this group?
I think first of all, we must appreciate that this chaos in Somalia has spawned an industry where they are beneficiaries. So each time we think that the Al-Shabaab problem is receding, they tend to regroup. It means they are getting financial resources and also weapons. I think it is time now to begin to look for a more local solution for this particular problem, because external intervention alone has demonstrated that it can't solve this Somali problem. So the government of Somalia and the international community and regional countries should begin looking into more local solutions for this Al-Shabaab problem in Somalia.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, though. Thanks so much for your time. Douglas Okwach is the editor of CCTV's Talk Africa program. We've been keeping tabs on the events in Somalia. Right now, we're taking a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Closing ranks, South Sudan will be sending the Vice President to Khartoum to iron out a row over oil flow. And taking a stand, Nile Basin Initiative countries meet in Juba over the Ethiopia-Egypt row over the Nile.
This week on Talk Africa.
Nelson Mandela is the face of Africa.
There's a part of Nelson Mandela that is loved by the entire world.
Truly just makes you want to be better.
We at CCTV Africa are choosing to stand with Mandela.
I have fought very firmly.
Knowing him as I do is a good fighter.
And this Saturday, we will be dedicating the program to your thoughts and wishes for Africa's Madiba.
Best wishes for Tata Mandela.
Get well, Madiba, get well, Madiba.
You can send in your video messages to our email, cctvafricanm@gmail.com. Post your comments on our Facebook page or send your message via Twitter using the hashtag #TalkAfrica and stand with Mandela.
It's 10:15 GMT. You're watching Africa Live. South Sudan's Vice President Riek Machar will visit Khartoum, the Sudanese capital, next week, according to Sudanese state media. Now, his arrival there would mark the highest level talks ever since Sudan threatened to cut off cross-border oil flows about 2 weeks ago. Bilateral ties hit a new low this month when Sudan said it would stop South Sudan's oil exports through its territory for shipment abroad within 60 days, unless Juba ended alleged support for rebels operating across their common border. Now, Juba has consistently denied those claims. The African Union has been pretty busy trying to defuse the situation, hoping relative peace will emerge between the two neighbors who split in 2011. Both countries accuse each other of backing rebels on the other's territory in one of several conflicts stemming from the split of what once was Africa's largest country. Now, Ethiopia has urged other Nile nations to ratify a controversial water deal fiercely opposed by Egypt. Ethiopia used a regional meeting aimed at promoting cooperation over the Nile River to challenge Egypt's historical majority use of the Nile's water. Now, the countries have been embroiled in a heated row after Ethiopia began diverting the Blue Nile River last month for the construction of a 6-gigawatt Grand Renaissance Dam. Now, that in turn has sparked quite a bit of concern in Cairo about the impact on water levels downstream. Just last week, Ethiopia's parliament ratified the Nile Basin Initiative's Cooperative Framework Agreement. That's a deal which replaces a colonial-era agreement that granted Sudan and Egypt access to a majority of the Nile's water. Ethiopia is building the Grand Renaissance Dam in order to generate electricity, including for exports to neighboring countries, and it insists that work will not hamper downstream flows in any way. Further south on the continent, Zimbabweans continue to wait with bated breath for resolution to dispute over the forthcoming elections date. President Robert Gabriel Mugabe was urged by SADC leaders last week to seek a 2-week extension to the 31st July poll date from the country's constitutional court. CCTV's Farai Makutuya has this update on the unfolding debate over the date for the elections in the Southern African country.
The conflicting messages from the continental bodies have done little to provide clarity to Zimbabwe's electorate on when they will go and cast their ballots. SADC's determination follows more than 4 years of mediation, which is supposed to climax with the holding of credible polls this year.
I think that SADC's consideration is that they have invested a lot of time, money, energy, and there's a lot of, the whole world is looking at them to see if they're going to solve the Zimbabwean crisis once and for all.
In line with the regional bloc's Maputo resolution, Zimbabwe's Justice Minister lodged an appeal with the Constitutional Court on Tuesday. Legal experts have ruled out the court overturning its initial verdict, as this would set a precedent that is seen as compromising the judiciary.
I don't see that happening because the court would want to set a record of independence and the finality of its decision.
The MDC and other parties have pushed for a delay in the election to allow for adequate reforms to take place. Analysts believe that even with the limited time that would be available if the court denies government's appeal, a free and fair election is still achievable.
If there is commitment, I think that the few things that are remaining can be done in the next few days, even 2 days. These are things that can be done.
The Constitutional Court has postponed hearing the appeal until Wednesday next week. The major political parties here, that is President Robert Mugabe's ZANU-PF and Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai's MDC, are not waiting for that court decision. We've already seen them rolling out their campaign materials and party regalia in preparation for the elections. So regardless of what date the court sets, the battle lines have been drawn. Farai Makutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.